Buonasera a tutti, io sono Marco Romandini, un collaboratore di Wired e presento questa conferenza con Vasily Gatov che si intitola Un occhio puntato sulla Russia. Perché un occhio puntato sulla Russia? Ultimamente si parla molto di russi, di Putin, del Cremlino, li si vede implicati dietro le elezioni americane, li si vede dietro le rivelazioni di Wikileaks, li si vede dietro qualsiasi attacco hacker, che non è vero, ma questo è un altro discorso. Oppure li si vede i salvatori del mondo, Putin, paladino della giustizia, in base, diciamo, anche spesso all'orientamento politico. Perché succede questo, questa divisione quasi manichea, no? Da una parte abbiamo il bene assoluto, da una parte il male assoluto. Perché l'informazione è influenzata dalla propaganda. E oggi appunto abbiamo uno dei massimi esperti della propaganda russa, perché con la propaganda russa ci ha lavorato all'agenzia RIA Novosti, e ci parlerà degli strumenti della propaganda, che utilizza la propaganda. Però ricordate che uno strumento già ce l'avete e hai il dubbio. Perché, come diceva Bertolt Brecht, di tutte le cose sicure, la più sicura è il dubbio. Ladies and gentlemen, Vasily Gatov. Hi, Vasily.
Hey.
Welcome to Florence. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
One
Grazie.
Next Fest. So, how does the propaganda work?
It uses our imperfections. The main weapon of propaganda is a knowledge of that humans are not perfect, and their psychology is not perfect, the society is not perfect, the ways we interact is not perfect, and therefore uses this imperfection. Propaganda can obsess us with certain ideas, with certain intentions, and finally persuade us to actions. And more we study propaganda as a subject, and we started to do that very long ago, altogether. I mean, even in Chinese books of war from the 2nd century AD, there's also something that could be interpreted as propaganda today. We are knowing more and more, and finally it all comes to that humans are not perfect. And this is weakness that we have to understand, and we have to mitigate, and we have to deal with, and we have to learn to be better in some ways, and we have to change our regulations, our rules, to make it more difficult for those who intend to change us to worse, to do bad things, to accept bad things, not to achieve this. So propaganda works through us. It's not that it changes things around us without our participants. And I can tell you more about that. I think giving like a few seconds before kind of formal presentation, I can say that sometimes we take for propaganda things that are in normal political competition. But sometimes we do not detect propaganda because it comes in such specific, such subtle, such comfortable forms, supporting your own concerns, your own beliefs, like, I don't know, you're afraid of vaccination. And then it transpires into the fact that you start to believe in some stupid ideas about that vaccination can produce negative effect on the kids, and then you start to be a part of the movement that prevents kids from vaccination. And for example, for the United States, it's a huge problem. The country technically get got rid of most of infectious diseases, like completely. And then if you somehow don't vaccinate your child and it gets to the school with a disease, no other children have immunity to that. I mean, they never faced this trouble. And that becomes a societal problem. Although it comes from the very subtle belief of one man or one woman who is afraid of making injection to her baby or whatever. So, as I say, propaganda uses our imperfections, our fears, our frustrations, our readiness to believe in things, because, of course, propaganda uses beliefs. And sometimes it also awakens bad thing in us, because we, in fact, as I said, are imperfect, and also we consist of good and evil, and you can practically manipulate, well, not every human, but many humans, to do evil things. And when we sort of, because fake news and propaganda have become such a hot topic during the last campaign in the United States, in France recently, now in Germany, we see political part of it. But basically, the most dangerous, the most malicious, and unfortunately the most long-standing part of propaganda are the components that has nothing to do with politics, that rely on very long-existing fears or frustrations, like the frustration of others, and therefore make political statements coming from isolationists, from people who are against immigration, for people who are against people of other race, quite efficient. And playing on these frustrations, people achieve electoral victories, like Donald Trump. Other governments achieve influence over other countries, sometimes. And corporations achieve influence over our behavior as consumers, making us buy and consume things that we probably shouldn't buy and consume. It's all big part of human civilization, which we must remember, and we must try to develop our very own personal and, on the other hand, societal remedy to that. And like democracy, it's a process. It's not the result. It's not a fixed thing. I mean, we have to modernize, and we have to face the challenge and develop a solution for the challenge.
In June, we talked about the Blue Whale game. You remember? I wrote an article about that. You said me it was a sort of propaganda of Kremlin to restrict control over social media. Can you explain them?
Well, the story of the blue whale fear hoax is an interesting example of, as we say, two-step operation. On one hand, it's a legitimate kind of fear of parents who heard or probably even faced the problem of their kids being engaged in some dangerous game that could lead them to suicide. And in Russia, there was several cases. They were coming into some closed social network groups. Some anonymous instructors were giving them instructions what to do next, and finally they were coming to a suicidal attempt, at least. Initially it looked like yet another kids experiment, and probably it was nothing more than a kids experiment, but somebody who analyzes social trends in Kremlin just thought it's a good method to say that social networks are more dangerous, even more dangerous, more dangerous. And because it's about kids' lives and potential of loss of teenage life, or one or two or even none, but threat, they played a very careful game of emphasizing this and promulgating into new changes in Russian legislation that put another restriction of social media. And you must understand, it's not restriction on social media like a German law that demands from Facebook to take down the content that is not vetted or being argued. It's a physical prohibition of certain content on the Facebook, and several people were already charged. Facebook, VKontakte, Russian analog of Facebook, several people were already charged, faced criminal charge, because the government just wanted to use this as a tool for a further control over social networks. Although initially it was a good goal, I mean, prevent the loss of life of children, but it ended up as a new wave of political and freedom of speech persecution.
Do you think other political parties in Europe can spread this propaganda, Russian propaganda, maybe populistic parties?
It's a two-way street, because from what we know now from open and classified sources, Russia had maintained relations with fringe political movements in most European countries. But the biggest interest for Russia was domestic, not international. They needed foreign politicians to legitimize their electoral process. Elections are absolute fake in Russia. I mean, this is not elections as you know it, because people come, cast their ballots, and then somehow the result shows up, and it has nothing to do with the real voting. Because it's what Putin or his officers want to draw there. As Joseph Stalin once said, it's not important who votes, it's important who counts. And therefore they need foreign observers. And many Western fringe politicians serve as these observers to Russia, even to Crimea. On the other hand, Russia always would like to do some harm to European Union and to every form of association in Europe, because historically Russia successfully dealt with every single European nation, even the biggest European nation, but never was really easy for Russia to deal with any type of union. Would it be forced union like Germany, German invasion in 1945, or conquered Europe like it was with Napoleon invasion, or just joint forces of two neighbors, Poland and Lithuania in 1612. So Russia just wants to prevent alliances in Europe. And therefore all fringe parties, all ultra-right parties, and left as well, are very anti-EU. And that serves Russian interests, because I mean, they pump secessionist movements. They through these organizations, they kind of maintain certain level of cohesive relations inside the societies that can, in a way, lead to Brexits, Grexits, Idzics, Aspics, exits, and so on. That's normal diplomatic and security goal, I mean, for the country that is actually in defensive. And this is also important. Russia is defensive. It's not, even if it looks like aggression, it's in fact the protection of Putin's own power inside and a manifestation of insecurity that Russia always has since the dissolution of Soviet Union.
What do you think about the rumors that WikiLeaks linked with Russian secret services. So.
Well, we can only speculate about that. I mean, there is no clear data that allows us to speak, but circumstantial evidence shows that there should be some relations. And I'm trying to be responsible here. I mean, these are nothing more than speculation. Julian Assange had a program on RT 5 years ago, 4 years ago. Head of RT maintains that Assange is her friend. Assange made several statements that possibly could be interpreted as he's sympathetic to Russia. On the other hand, unlike major WikiLeaks releases that come in English and are accessible to most readers in the world, I mean, Russian compromising materials, Russian leaks would be in Russian. There would be very few people outside Russia who can read them and make fun of them or make political codes of them. So, well, you should consider that Assange is also a market maker, and he would probably publish something in Italian, but it would be like the third interest because it's big language, very important language, but it's not English.
Yeah. How so many people love Vladimir Putin in populistic parties or groups?
Well, I don't think usually in most cases this far right or far left views, kind of fringe political beliefs, are not very popular. I mean, they very rarely exceed several percent of population. I mean, in very few countries you can have a radical party kind of running outside 5-6% of electoral vote. But sometimes in special conditions, in situations when frustration or social frustration jumps over a certain level, we now see that in France, for example, Marine Le Pen gathered nearly 35% of the vote. Alternative für Deutschland received nearly 14% of votes to Bundestag. That's dangerous and pretty serious warning. But the difference between the rise of the aggressive populism that led to the World War 65 years ago, so 51 already, is actually built on different type of frustrations, built on different type of challenges. And I hope that the societies, and especially European societies, will find their own mitigation to the thing. And I don't think that we'll maybe see the kind of this wave continuing, but it shouldn't. I mean, this is not a prophecy. This is just calculation. Kind of. America is a very interesting example where fake news used, or propaganda weapons used as a tool, it actually used not by Russians in primary, I mean, but the Americans against themselves, played an important, decisive role because the society is highly polarized. I mean, 50% of Americans vote for Democrats, 50% vote for Republicans, and a very small batch can spoil elections. I mean, get it into other part, and if the influence operation was successful enough to reach this particular several thousand men, in order for them to act in a certain way or not to act, because I would probably pretend to say that it's not that, I mean, this influence not brought 68 additional people to vote for Trump. It's 68,000 Democrats who didn't come to vote are more kind of responsible for what happened. In a way, in polarized societies, it's much more dangerous. When you have a fractured political scene with dozens of parties competing for like dozens of percent in parliament, yes, it's really nasty to have nationalists decrying sort of fate of the nation in the parliament, or making obscure political statement, or demanding immigrants to be thrown out. But in fact, the society is balanced by different political interests. In polarized societies, of course, it's much worse, and it's much more dangerous. Really small effect may produce a political maelstrom of this awful scale we can see in America.
What do you think about Putin interviews by Oliver Stone? Is it a sort of propaganda, maybe? Or just the...
It's a good question, because I would probably not rediscover America to say it works one way within Russia and different way outside Russia. For domestic purposes, that was a very important thing. It kind of maintained the image of Putin as father of the nation, as person who cares, who knows, who is imperfect. I think he kind of even purposely demonstrated some imperfections, like things that he couldn't remember, or he made mistakes that were very easily discovered. But this is a humane thing, to make mistakes, to forget things. On the other hand, for Western and particularly American audience, he demonstrated exactly what Americans waited to see. Someone powerful, inventious, staunchly anti-American, sitting in his Kremlin bunker and designing evil things that change the world to worse, like Mr. Evil, Dr. Evil. And that enhanced the effect, would it be real or imaginary, of American scare about Russian influence over elections. For me as a communication researcher, it was clear that it was very well timed. It was absolutely PR driven. There was no policy there. It's particular communication. And it was intended to magnify, to amplify already existing effect of, well, Russians are everywhere. Russians are, like Comey said, I mean, it's clear and persistent danger. And now Putin himself shows, yes, I'm clear and persistent danger. So I think that in this way, it was a successful operation. But on the other hand, I don't think that Oliver Stone was a good medium for that, because Oliver Stone has pretty controversial reputation in the United States. He's very left. He's far more left than Americans can pertain. So maybe it was a good try, but one of the major scientific findings about fake news, and probably it's your own personal experience also will tell you, is that it's a very inefficient process, extraordinarily inefficient. In order to achieve a viral distribution, in order to achieve a waterfall effect, you need to try about 100,000 times. And all these bots, fake Twitter accounts and so on, they work tirelessly. One of academic researchers recently published a paper where he discovered a bot, a Twitter bot, that in order to achieve a certain kind of distribution, made 97,000 tweets in, I remember, 3 days and 14 hours, because it was the shortest time that was allowed by Twitter to make so many tweets. So it tried and tried and tried and tried, and finally never achieved. And also, another discovery of this research showed that if we take 1 million tweets made by everyone, 990,000 tweets are read by one human, other than the author. And as in the remaining 1,000, another 900 read by 2 or 3, and only 100 of a million is read by more than 3 people. So we are pretty lonely in the world of social networks. And bots, would they be malignant or not really comfortable things, they help us not to feel ourselves alone. At least they read our tweets.
And what are the main tools used by propaganda, by Russian propaganda in this case? What are the main tools?
Well, the main tools, well, it still would be a confusion arch, in the classical propaganda model that engages you with your frustration. It finds your weak spot, the thing that really concerns you. Then it kind of converts it into an anxiety. It entertains you with your own fear. When the fact of confusion reached, it offers you a mindset, it plops a mindset in your own memory, saying that if something like this happened before, then we should do this, or we should think this. And this kind of mindset preparation, which is done by our parents, by our education, school, newspapers, magazines, television, is a very dangerous thing. It's actually the main tool of propaganda. Like, most of the criminals in the series that we watch, American series, would be, well, let's say, of different race, but most of this race would be not white. And that happens for years, and it's not because people who devised the series are racist. It's because they need a mindset, this is somebody bad, Arab, Black, Latino, and so on.
Yeah.
And they address our mindset with a very, very sort of small trick, exemplifying the other. And propaganda always exemplifies the other, whatever it would be, migrant, people of different views, people who want something you don't want. And then coming into this mindset, it achieves the main goal. The goal is to take your attention and feed you with suggestions what to do. Vote for this politician, protest against this thing, take this position on referendum, take another position on referendum. And then the thing is that the modern influence techniques are kind of quantity-based. They just try. Where they find a weak spot, they get in. And so the technology from the old times, when every fake required a long-running, secret, professional espionage operations with agents of influence, and useful idiots, today all of this is offered you in digital form, and some of them are not even humans. So they pump it out.
Can you speak about the RT and Sputnik, that are the main global media, Russian media, that spread propaganda? If you want.
Yeah, I can. Russia had established re-established. In fact, Soviet Union had everything like that until 1991. Their tools of international propaganda, targeting very specific audience initially. RT was targeted on English-speaking and Arabic-speaking audience, then expanding to Spanish and recently to French and German. Also Sputnik, that is kind of a text version of RT, spawns over 47 languages. Of course, they're of different intensivity, but it exists. And its major goal is to bring confusion. Not even convert people into do something that Russians want, just bring confusion. As I said, I mean, there's a lot of frustrations about globalization, about discomfort of European Union for Europe, concerns about workplaces that have been taken by people from other countries, concerns about regulation that makes your life uncomfortable, which comes not from your own country where you pay taxes, but from some people in Brussels. And that's an easy spot to go. I mean, just try. I mean, this doesn't work, that will work. And a very important part of this is that, same like with the far left parties and far right parties, it's a mutually supportive thing. I mean, those who go to RT to sort of to tell these fringe positions, then are being supported by RT as newsmakers, although they're not newsmakers, they're nobody. And then in few months, because your media also follows what RT does or Sputnik does, I mean, a person who was nobody yesterday with no reputation to speak for people, for groups and so on, just emerges as an opinion leader. That is dangerous. Don't do that. I mean, just don't do that.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you very much, Vasily.